Welcome to this evening's public workshop. This is, as you know, related to the city's transition from at-large to district-based elections. And we're very glad that you're here. You're an essential part to this process, and we appreciate your participation. You're going to be key to developing the district maps that will ultimately be presented to the City Council for consideration. So we're here tonight to provide some information to you about the process, the principles that go into drafting the maps, and then how you can provide your input. And before we get into all of that information, I'd like to encourage everyone that's attending this evening to bookmark a certain page on our website. It is www.diamondbarca.gov/districting. You'll see that particular link in some of the slides during tonight. Make sure that you write that down. That web page is going to be the one-stop shop for everything districting here in town. So you're going to find the latest news, frequently asked questions. There's a dedicated email there where you can contact us directly with any questions or comments that you have. There will be information about our upcoming web workshops and our in-person workshops, community of interest surveys, and soon there will be access to a software program called Districtor. And this is something that will help you draw your own maps for consideration. And so once again, diamondbarca.gov/districting. And again, that will be on your screen. We do have representatives from our consulting group, Redistricting Partners, here this evening. And before I hand it off to Liz Stitt, who will be presenting tonight's main event, if you will, I thought it'd be helpful to explain a little bit about how we got here. And so for those of you that may have attended previous meetings that we've had on this subject, it might sound familiar. I apologize, bear with me, but I think it's important to go through this information again, just so that anyone who's new to the process understands why we're here. So Diamond Bar has had at-large city council elections since it incorporated back in 1989. That means that everyone votes for their representatives that represent everyone in town. In the 2001 California Voting Rights Act prohibits agencies from using such at-large systems if it impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice and makes it easier for plaintiffs to challenge agencies with at-large systems. Back in January, the city received a letter from a potential CVRA plaintiff alleging that Diamond Bar's at-large voting system impairs Latino voters from electing candidates of their choice. And that letter demanded that the city transition to district-based elections within 45 days or face litigation. And when I say it demands that it transitions, it means that they're asking us to adopt a resolution of intent to transition. And we'll go into more detail about the process that follows that. The city then commissioned an analysis to determine if the allegations had validity, and that analysis determined that there was evidence of racially polarized voting among a protected class here in Diamond Bar. No public agency defendant that has successfully prevailed in the courts, and the few cities that have challenged the allegations have ended up spending hundreds of thousands and into the millions of dollars. One city in particular is already $8 million deep into the process. The elections code from the state has a safe harbor provision for agencies that voluntarily and expeditiously transition to a district-based election process. And this would then cap plaintiffs' attorneys' fees at no more than $30,000. So at the February 17th special meeting of the City Council, the Council chose to adopt Resolution 6/2022, stating its intent to transition to district-based elections. So we started the safe harbor process back on March 1st at the regular City Council meeting. That was the first of 5 public hearings required as part of the districting process within a 90-day period. That meeting and the one that is scheduled for next Tuesday, March 15th, are held specifically to collect testimony from the public on factors that impact the drawing of district boundaries before the district maps are prepared and discussed in open session. And because we value your input and your input is essential to the process, we're hosting tonight's meeting and a series of others that will follow to collect your feedback, as well as the other options on our website and via email. You can provide that information as well. Our next workshop which will be similar to this one, is currently scheduled for March 23rd. That will be at 6:30, and it will also be a virtual meeting via Zoom. Following that meeting, we'll have another public workshop on April 9th at 10 a.m. That will be in person at the Heritage Park Community Center. And then on April 16th, again at 10 a.m., there will be an in-person workshop at the Diamond Bar Center. And those workshops are in addition to the regular scheduled city council meetings, in which there will be additional public hearing options. So with all of that introduction, I'd like to introduce Liz Stitt from Redistricting Partners, and she's going to provide a detailed presentation on the Voting Rights Act, the districting process, communities of interest, how the maps are drawn in compliance with state and federal laws, how, again, you can participate in the process at public hearings and public workshops like this. And so after that is complete, we'll open the floor for your comments. Please use the raised hand icon and we'll be sure to call on you there. And with that, I would hand it over to Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Really excited to be here with you all. Ryan pretty much hit the nail on the head there. This is very much a public process. So very thankful we have so many people on the call tonight. And like he said, this is going to be a mixture of on Zoom and in person. And at the end, I'll show you the public hearing schedule, so you'll know exactly when to expect maps to come out and the next hearings and stuff like that. So on tonight's agenda, we'll be going over the California Voting Rights Act. Ryan just did a great job at describing what it is, so I'll probably just fly through that. And then the districting basics and the redistricting principles that we use to guide the process. And then communities of interest, why that's important here and how it's relevant to you all. And then we'll talk about how you can give your own public testimony. There will be multiple ways for you to do it, both in person and online. So let's start getting into it. So as Ryan was discussing, there is the California Voting Rights Act, not to be confused with the Federal Voting Rights Act. There are two laws that the city has to abide by, both very different. So the Federal Voting Rights Act, really what it's doing there is it's assessing if there are majority minority districts of vulnerable populations. And if there are, then the city would help make sure that those populations are able to pick the candidate of their choice under the federal or under the California Voting Rights Act. That threshold of majority minority is it's lowered. So all the plaintiff has to do is show that there is an ability to influence. And then that would be considered a CVRA. Also under the CVRA, plaintiffs do get fully reimbursed for their legal fees. So there is this incentive for lawyers to bring these cases forward and help cities convert over to districted elections. And as Ryan mentioned, there are safe harbor provisions which do lessen the total legal fees associated with these cases. So what is districting? Right now, as Ryan mentioned, we are at large. So that means everyone in the city votes for all the candidates who are running for city council. However, districted essentially means it will be split up into districts. Pretty simple. However, it will not change a few things, including how the city decides to govern. We've seen some agencies who decided to continue working together as a city council to achieve citywide goals. And we've also seen others who want to focus on their specific district. So it's more of a cultural issue on what the city council decides to do. And of course, citizens, residents will still have the ability to lobby their elected officials call up their elected officials for services and help. So that absolutely will not be changed. Really, the only two things that districting will do is decide who is eligible to run for office and who can vote for that person. So you have to live in your district and you have to live in the district in order to vote for that person. And what is redistricting? So redistricting happens after a city or agency is districted. So in 10 years, you guys will redistrict. It happens every 10 years after the US Census population comes out. And it essentially just rebalances the districts to make sure that each district is relatively equal in population. And so these are some of the traditional redistricting principles that we'll be using throughout this process. They are in state law, they are well established and used throughout the country. And they're also here to keep everything above board and help prevent gerrymanders. So the first traditional criteria we use is make sure every district is relatively equal in size. And then we want to make sure that each district is contiguous. So this might be a new word for you. It's very specific to redistricting or districting. It essentially just means that the district is one whole piece and you're not jumping from one district and catching a part of another district and putting it into one. So it's got to be one whole piece. And then we want to maintain communities of interest. This is a very important aspect, and it's why we have everyone here tonight. We want to hear from the community on your own community of interest. A definition of that includes it's a group of people, a neighborhood, a community with similar policy concerns and who would benefit from being districted together. And then we want to follow city, county, local government lines when practicable. This includes things like school districts, or it can include man-made or natural boundaries like highways or rivers oftentimes. And then finally, we want to keep districts compact. So we want to avoid those funny looking shapes that people tend to associate with gerrymandering. Let's go back to maintain communities of interest, since this is why we're here tonight. Really, the only way that we can collect information on communities of interest is by going to the public to get your own testimony on where your community is. We like to think of them as building blocks of districts. So we try our best to avoid splitting up communities to not dilute their voting power. Communities of interest is a very subjective and open-ended definition to be as inclusive as possible. I do want to mention that there are protected classes under the Federal Voting Rights Act. That includes Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. But unless it's a Section 2 voting rights compliance issue, race can't be the predominant factor in drawing district boundaries. But there are tons of communities of interest that we can consider. So things like historical communities, tourism areas, school districts, neighborhoods, media markets. This is by no means an exhaustive list. So LGBTQ neighborhoods, which isn't on there, is often considered a community of interest. So I usually like to say, if you can make the argument that your community is a community of interest, then it probably is, unless it's one of these three things. So California follows the Fair Maps Act, and it specifically prohibits these three groups from being considered communities of interest. So party, political affiliation, incumbents, political candidates, and that's there to prevent incumbent gerrymandering and partisan gerrymandering. And then this next part, it's not prohibited under the Fair Maps Act. It's just really hard to draw. So groups of similarly minded people who do not share a geographic location or are citywide. So remember, we want to protect our communities of interest when we're drawing lines. And if a community of interest is citywide, then that doesn't necessarily help the map drawers. And then these are 3 questions that we like to ask people before they testify, to sort of get them thinking about their own communities. So first and foremost, does the community have a shared culture, characteristic, or bond? We've been hearing a lot of stories this cycle about communities coming together during COVID-19 or during forest fires and the resources that they shared. So if you can make it a personal story and how you use those resources with your neighbors or community, that would be incredibly helpful. Next, is the community geographic in nature? Can it be mapped? We are looking for street boundaries, neighborhoods, landmarks, something that lets us know specifically where your community is so we don't accidentally cut through it. And then finally, how would you describe your community's relationship with the jurisdiction, so the city of Diamond Bar, and how is it affected by the city council's decisions? So I'm just going to go through some quick exercises to get you thinking about communities of interest. Again, it's a very vague definition, so this is to help get you to understand it. So first, a group of renters who testify and they live by Maple Hill Park testifies to the city about redistricting. Would this be considered a community of interest? And I'll just give you a couple seconds. Yes. So you can tell that this is a community of interest by the fact that they all live close to one another and they share similar policy concerns. So they're all renters. They're probably concerned about the price of renting or something related to protections for renters. So they are absolutely considered a community of interest. Next, part of town that has a historic nature, either as a former hub of business, community, or as an area that had been discriminated against through redlining. Would this be considered a community of interest? Would it be prioritized during the districting process? So yes, absolutely. Historical communities are definitely recognized as a community of interest. And one of the great things about going through the districting or the redistricting process is it does reach out to communities, particularly those who have been underserved, so we can hear their voices and make sure that they are getting the representation that they deserve. And then finally, last question, a statewide group for people who are fans of the Los Angeles Dodgers testifies to the city council on districting. Would this be considered a community of interest? So unfortunately not. So remembering that the community in question, they need to have some kind of policy relevancy to the city of Diamond Bar. So unfortunately here, the Los Angeles Dodgers group would not be a community of interest that we would consider. And so let's start talking about how you can give your own testimony. You are invited to give testimony throughout this entire process. So you will have access to the COI forms, so community of interest forms, which are online and will be translated into multiple, sorry if you can hear people honking outside my door. So it'll be translated into multiple languages. And you'll also have access to map drawing tools. So we're looking specifically for 2 different types of maps from the public. One map on communities of interest, and then another one, you'll be able to draw your own districted maps of the city council. There's going to be a couple ways for you to do that. We will create districted physical maps. So when we're in person, you'll be able to take a map and actually draw on it and hand it in. Or you'll be able to use Districtor. So Districtor is a tool that was specifically made for everyday people to draw their own districts during the redistricting process. So it's made for people like you. Diamond Bar will have access to their Districtor page next week. So look out for that. I'm going to give a demo on how to use Districtor at the end of all of this. So you'll be able to at least get a jump start on knowing how to use it before it comes out. And then, of course, there are multiple ways for you to continue to stay engaged. So obviously tonight being the first outreach workshop, March 15th, we will have a city council meeting and public hearing. So the public is invited to come out, give testimony, give their opinion on how they think the map should be drawn, followed by March 23rd, another virtual workshop, and then April 2nd, and then, which I actually believe that should be April 9th. So April 9th is in person, as Ryan mentioned at the beginning of this call, and then we will start presenting draft maps on April 19th. So even though, or actually on April 16th. So even though we'll have draft maps out, the public is still invited to give testimony, let us know what you think about the draft maps. Does it look right to you? Would you make any changes? So with that, all of this information, all of the meetings will be recorded. The schedule will be on this website here. So it's www.diamondbarca.gov/districting. Everything related to districting will be on this webpage. So with that, Joe and I are happy to take questions. And at the end of questions, I can do a little districting, District R demo.
So yeah, folks can use the raise hand function. I see people are beginning to do that. There's also the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom where you can type in your question. I'm going to go ahead and start with just the raise hands. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to go with Tanis Nelson, and I will allow you to speak right now. And again, questions right now are about the redistricting process. If you want to provide testimony about how the district should be drawn, that will be after this section. So Tanis, go ahead.
Wondering if the presentation itself would be on that same website. The presentation that Liz just covered for us. Will it be available on the website?
It's a little difficult to hear you, but I believe you asked if the presentation will be available on the website. Yes, we can definitely make the slides available, and this recording will be on the website as well.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Tanis.
Oh, Joe, you muted.
Sorry, my bad. Now I'm going to go with Angela Benelos. So go ahead, Angela.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I have 2 questions. So the first one is, so the CVRA analysis was conducted last year. Is that client privilege information or is that available to the public? And then the second question is, are we going to be provided with the demographic breakdown to understand where these protected class voters reside within the district. So it's easier for us to provide a scenario for consideration.
So I'll answer the second question and then I'll throw over the first question over to Omar. But yes, so one of the cool things about Districtor is you get a breakdown of all of the protected classes, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. So you'll have the ability to draw districts and see what the total citizen voting age population is along the way.
So let me make sure I understand the first question, and that is, you want to know who the plaintiffs or the proposed plaintiffs are?
No. At the beginning of the presentation, it was noted that a CVRA analysis was conducted for the city. So I was wondering if that is available to the public, or is it still under client privilege attorney?
So at this point, it is attorney-client, but we'll talk internally with staff to see if we can make that available.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you,
And thank you, Angela. The next person I'm going to go to is Adrian Cortrell. And 1 second. All right, go ahead, Adrian.
Okay, hi. So before you draw districts, you're going to get testimony about communities of interest, but you also need to take into account how the city council wants to organize. For example, they have to decide, are they staying with 5 city council members, or are they going to change to 4 and a mayor? How are those decisions being made, and what is the best way to provide testimony regarding that?
In terms of providing testimony, you can talk to us tonight about it or write in a community of interest form and let us know how you feel about a 4 or 5 district city. But in terms of what is being discussed at the city level, I'm actually going to defer to Ryan to answer that question.
Sure. I think the best way to participate in that discussion is to attend one of the city council public hearings. Any decision related to the structure of the council in the future is going to be made during those hearings. And so I would encourage you to participate in those meetings, attend, and have the opportunity to speak during the public hearing to share your views.
So if I may, my experience so far with city council meetings is an agenda item is there, public is invited to make comment, and then city council members cannot really respond because of the Brown Act, and then they have their conversation. So it's not really a conversation with the public. There's no, well, you know, if we did that, but then what about this? And what are the pros and what are the cons? It's very, it seems to me it's very unsatisfactory as far as decision-making regarding these very important things. So I guess I'm trying to find out more about how do we have give and take? Are the public sessions where you're asking about community of interest, is that a time when people can discuss, or is it just one-sided? Here's what I think, here's what my group thinks, and we're telling you.
Can I answer that, Ryan?
Go ahead.
So the format for the city council meetings with respect to the redistrictings are public hearings. So it's not that you are going to be required to address the council during public comments. There is a specific public hearing set aside to hear from the public, and public hearing format can be, discussion back and forth. So we are encouraging everyone to attend these public hearings and address the council and discuss the item with the city council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm going to go to Andrew Wong now. So Andrew, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Thank you. Hi. Yes. So I too would I second in terms of requesting that that the CVRA analysis be be made public, just for the public to review and have a better understanding of their findings and assertions. Secondly, I would also be supportive of, in terms of the structure of council, to be larger, if you would, instead of potentially 5 members or 4 plus a mayor, that the city consider perhaps looking into perhaps 6 council members and a mayor. And part of my testimony of that is when I look at adjacent cities or neighboring cities, such as the city of Brea, city of Chino Hills, those are cities that are under district elections. And when you look at that, if you just strictly look at perhaps by race, there isn't as much diversity as what district elections may have intended for, in terms of diversity. And so I would suggest considering that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And again, we'll have a portion for more public testimony after this, but that is something that can be brought up, and that is a decision that will be made by the council. So thank you for your comment, Andrew. And I'm going to go to Greg next. So 1 second, Greg. There you go, Greg. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm probably the only one that's just walking in the middle of the movie here. I just don't understand this whole involvement. I assume everything is a nonprofit organization, or they wouldn't be suing people. But we can't do this on a race level. Is this correct? To say all the black people that live here and all the Mexicans that live here and all the white people here. I mean, I don't understand. Are we looking for a neighborhood that's well blended? The community of interest to me starts at Temple and it ends at Brea Canyon Boulevard. So I guess now we got to dip into the minutia. And I just don't understand how this is related. I see, okay, do buses run through here? Does it run through every community of industry or interest? Do they have enough parks in each community of interest? If I lived in this community of interest, do I now lose anything to use of another community of interest, which I know is a stupid statement. However, it just seems like we are just starting to alienate people, and people just can't understand of one thing. We're all Americans. I think we blended well, very well, of all neighborhoods. Diamond Bar, where you have 59% Asian, you have 19% Hispanic, 14.7% white, okay, Native Americans. What is the reason? Who's lost out in this deal that this is such a big deal? And it's something I feel like laws, they're made for a small percentage of people who cause the problem, while 97 other percent are too busy wanting to have a family, make a living, go on a vacation, have a dog, whatever. Right. And it just seems we want to throw this away. We just want to make it smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm just to the point, I don't understand what this is about. Now, someone mentioned Brea. I understand Brea is having their own problem from another group of this CVRA or whatever the heck it's called. It's what does the common man, as a common man, what do I have to give you? Or what do I have to give to satisfy these people?
So Greg, if I'm hearing your questions right, it's one about why are we doing this process, and two, the question, which is also in the chat in regards to the Latino community, about the parameters we use when drawing districts based on race. And I'm happy to refer those questions to Omar, who's the legal counsel here. But just in general, there are specific guidelines laid out by the Federal Voting Rights Act that are very specific, and that we will work with legal counsel on determining if they come into play in the city of Diamond Bar. Additionally, this is part of the CVRA process, and as Brian laid out earlier, this is a process that the city is currently undergoing, but I don't know if Omar wants to add anything to.
But the name comes up Latino. Why doesn't the name Pacific Islanders come up? These are very small, or the Native American are very small. The Latin community here is the second largest community in Diamond Bar. Many of my friends, I've been involved in sports here for 30 years. I see the meld of humanity in this city, and I don't understand also.
And Greg, we can take those things into consideration in the public testimony part. I do want to answer your specific questions about why this is happening, and let me refer that to Omar.
Yeah, so the state of California has completely lowered this threshold that used to be Federal Voting Rights Act and adopted its own threshold. And it is a very, very low bar to challenge at-large elections. So the public policy in the state of California that is handed down from Sacramento is that we want all elected agencies to go to district elections. And in order to do that is providing lawyers the ability to make a lot of money by sending these notices of violation and threatening litigation. And the reality is that once you are in litigation, the law requires that a judge grant the successful plaintiffs attorney's fees with multipliers plus the cost for their demographers and experts. And the experience that we have seen from cities that have tried to fight these, threatened litigation or these litigation on under the California Voting Rights Act have been made to pay millions of dollars in attorney's fees. And so far, no city has successfully challenged one of these litigations. So this is why we have a safe harbor. This is why we have to go through this process, and we have to complete it within 90 days. And here we are. So, it's not a choice that Diamond Bar residents made. It's not a choice that the city council made. It's basically a choice. Actually, the only option that the state has given a city and a city council that is currently elected by at-large elections.
Great, thank you, Omar. And with Greg, I'm going to ask. We're running a little bit over time here, so I'm going to go. There's one more question in the chat, but if you have more comments, feel free to provide them in the public testimony portion of this meeting. So with that, I'm going to go to Grace in the chat here, and then we have Jeff as well. So go ahead, Grace. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this presentation. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. I appreciate the discussion about the structure of the council. And I think what I'm gaining as an insight here, it's not about race. I'm getting the insight that in general, it's to maybe make our council more responsive to local people's needs, especially when we have geographical areas that have particular, common interests, not necessarily racial. It's just more like we have, for instance, some of us live in an area that is maybe underserved in certain things or facing challenges with traffic and pollution. My question would be, is there a criteria for determining how many districts and council members will be defined? I'm just wondering how it's not going to be set up. If that's too arbitrary, that wouldn't really help. So if there's a clear way to structure the council with a reasonable criteria for determining if that was done fairly. Otherwise, yeah, this could be, another way for just doing something strange and not meeting its goals. Thank you for taking my question.
Thank you, Grace. As far as I know, there is no criteria in terms of structure under the CVRA of a specific agency or city. But Omar, if you want to help answer this one.
Yes, under the government code, general law city, it has to be comprised of a minimum of 5 council members. And then the government codes have separate provision that says that a city can go to by district elections. And if it does that, it has the option to do 5, 7, or up to 9. We can't go more than 9. And with mayors that are rotated amongst the council members, or If the choice is to go to a directly elected mayor, then the districts would be 4, 6, or 8. So minimum of 5 council members, maximum of 9. And the combination is either 5, 7, or 9, or 4, 6, and 8 with a directly elected mayor.
I see. So if it's a
And-
directed,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
if it's just to make sure I understand, the 5, 7, 9 means one of those 5 or one of those 7 or one of those 9s will be elected as a mayor by the actual council.
Correct. Kind of the
The way
same
we do
way,
it now, right?
the same way that the city council rotates the mayor position today. Correct.
And the even numbers, when 4, 6, 8 plus mayor, the mayor would be elected by the whole, voting as a whole, or
Yes. Yeah, for directly elected
voting at
mayor,
large?
it would have to be an at-large. So every resident voter would vote for that mayoral position.
Thank you for clarifying.
Great, thank you, Grace. And then looks like we have Jeff, and then no other hands are up. So go ahead, Jeff. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, my question is if you can just clarify for me, I guess, where I might be misunderstanding something, but there's only one protected group that is really the end game of this redistricting, correct? Latinos, is that correct?
So really quickly, the letter we received was on behalf of Latinos, but it could be any other racial minority or protected class. Protected class is defined under federal law. I can tell you, for example, a couple of years ago, City of Fullerton received a similar demand by 2 separate groups, one on behalf of Black residents in Fullerton, and at the same time, a separate one on behalf of Korean residents in Fullerton. So you can have multiple minorities or protected class within the same jurisdiction.
Okay, but the thing we're responding to and the reason the city's moving ahead with this idea and proposal plan is because we need to address the criticism that the Latinos are being underrepresented in the council, correct?
That's correct. Southwest Border Registration,
Okay.
some sort of nonprofit, has alleged that the rights of Latinos to elect the candidates of choice or influence elections are being limited by the large election system.
Okay. And so we had an independent group on behalf of the city investigate initially to see if this seemed to have merit, correct?
We did, or the consultant did an analysis based on the California Voting Rights Act, again, based on the threshold of the California Voting Rights Act. And what the act says is that if there is racially polarized voting, then that by itself is evidence of violations of the California Voting Rights Act. And the consultant did find evidence of racially polarized voting.
So this kind of is a concise, I guess, well, it dovetails into what Greg asked earlier. It seems like it's what the consultant then is concluding, and it seems at odds with what Greg and I and others have recognized for decades here, is we don't have like an area where Latinos live. They're spread throughout the city. Isn't that correct? And if that is it really even possible to draw a district that captures, a majority of Latinos so that they can make sure that they're being represented the way they want?
So you may be correct about that, but the California Voting Rights Act doesn't look like the Federal Voting Rights Act, where you have to have sufficient numbers, like a district where you can draw a majority Latino or majority class to be able to actually elect a candidate of choice. That provision of the Federal Voting Rights Act has been taken out of the California Voting Rights Act. So it's sufficient for a group to have sufficient numbers just to influence the elections. So it may not be possible to draw a majority Latino district, but that is not a concern of the California Voting Rights Act.
So,
in fact, just one more thing. Sorry. In fact, under federal law, we cannot use race as the predominant factor for drawing districts because that would be unconstitutional unless there is evidence that the city majority voters have been block voting against, specifically to prevent a particular minority to be able to elect a candidate of their choice. And if that's the case, then you may use race, but I don't think that is an issue in Diamond Bar.
Okay, so if it turns out, as I think probably will be the case, that we've got different race and other communities of interest spread pretty evenly throughout the city, it really isn't going to matter what lines you come up with, right? You're going to end up with a similar kind of dynamic and demographic that's voting for each city council person, right? Sounds like that's probably what you end up with, no matter how the lines get drawn.
Correct. Well, so again, we haven't begun drawing the districts yet. So when these issues come up, we will work with the city's legal counsel to address them as they kind of come up. But again, the sessions like these are just to take in community input and to help us start thinking about this. As Omar said, though, with the evidence that has been provided, this has triggered the process to begin. And we are now in the process of converting to a districted system. So
thanks.
Yeah, it does look like I have Andrew Wong's hand up just one more time. Andrew, I'll give you one quick question and then we can move into the public testimony part.
Yes, just a quick comment. If I do remember correctly in the CVRA analysis, or at least what the summarized version from council meeting, the study did state that there are voting blocks, if you would. So that and we're basing our actions off of this study, and so that study is stating that there are voting blocks. So I just want to make that quick comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Andrew. I see Greg's hand up, but I think at this point we should transition to the public testimony portion of this meeting. So Liz,
and Joe, there was a question, but I think it's been answered in some of the responses.
That is correct. So with that, I'm just going to lower hands for now, but again, we can move into the public testimony portion. This is for you all to provide us feedback on your communities. You can also talk about some of the questions that came up as well and your input on that. And we will take them into consideration. So with that, we're going to use the raised hand function again. You can just, it's at the bottom of the screen. It says little hand that says raised hand. You can just click on that and I'll call on you. You can also drop information into the chat. And we can either answer your questions or just take that into consideration. And like Liz said earlier, there is a form on our website as well that you can download and send in and write your comments on. So with that, I'm happy to open this up to public testimony right now. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to provide some public input. And currently I'm seeing, all right, there we go. We're starting to get some hands in. So go ahead. I'm going to turn it to Grace right now. So go ahead, Grace. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, thanks again. So is this the time when we describe our area and why we think we qualify as a community of interest? Is that what we are testifying to?
That is correct, yes.
Oh, okay. So I hope I don't take too much time, but I'm just going to follow along the questionnaire that was online, the questions I saw. One of them was, how would you describe your community? Our common interest is that we're a middle to low income area in Diamond Bar. We have an elementary school in common, Walnut L, and a middle school in common, South Point. And we share one little park that some of us can walk to called Washington Street Mini Park off of Lincoln Street. We're a very family-oriented community that's very diverse in language and culture. A common interest we have is to keep our community safe, especially around our schools, and keep our crime low. We have a lot of geographical features that make us unique in Diamond Bar. We are designated in the general plan as transit-oriented development area. We are next to the Metrolink train station and City of Industry and the freeway, 60 freeway. So we are affected by the main arterial road, Brea Canyon Road and Golden Springs Drive. And one thing that is also affecting us greatly is the Brea Canyon Business Project, which is next to our residential area and right in front of our elementary schools. Washington Street Mini Park is really the only little park that we have in our neighborhood. And so we're looking to, improve our access to recreational resources. We have some public services nearby. We do have Market World as our main shopping area, surrounded by some food chains like Farmer Boys, In-N-Out Burgers, Foha. The homes that primarily make up our area include several homeowner associations off Washington Street and Lycoming. We also have 2 mobile home parks by Washington and Lycoming that kind of abut the railroad. But there's also a lot of single family homes of different size, single story, 2-story. And we also have, a lot of industrial business areas that kind of make our, communities a little different from typical Diamond Bar areas. So we have both medium and low density housing in our area. Where we have in common is a lot of issues with traffic, safety, especially with pedestrians. One of the goals in the general plan was to improve walkability and pedestrian friendliness. And as a TOD, we hope to improve the economic development of the area and address some of the issues we're facing with the Brea Canyon Business Project and the City of Industry Development. And we hope to have our voices better represented in our government, because some of the things that are happening in our area right now, we don't think that our government responded to our concerns and our fears. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace. And then would anybody else like to provide public testimony on any of the issues that we've addressed so far? I see Adrienne has her hand up, so I'm going to go to Adrienne. Go ahead, Adrienne.
Hi. Yeah, I would just like to say that if we go to districts, and we are going to districts, I would like to speak in favor of having direct mayor elections. And I want to speak in favor of that because once you divide up into districts, then districts start thinking a lot about themselves. Not to say that city council members can't sit and deliberate and share, because the fate of the city overall depends on cooperation and collaboration and good planning together. But there has to be an individual that can pull the council together, that can help council members have good conversations with one another, and that all of Diamond Bar can feel comfortable with. We have had the ability to elect people that all of Diamond Bar seem to agree should be elected. But once we go to districts, who is that one person that we all can agree has the fate of the city and its best interests in hand? And so I'd like to speak up for having an option of direct mayor elections. The only thing that goes with that is, if we want to increase representation of certain groups of people, maybe 4 isn't enough, and we have to go to 6 districts. But then I worry, Diamond Bar is not very big. We're kind of small, and that's a lot. And I'm not sure, where are we going to get all these people who run for office? I'm not sure we've had a history of lots and lots of people wanting to run for office, and that worries me as well. So these are just comments. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. All right. I seen, all right, we have 1 second. Is it Tani's has raised her hand. So 1 second, Tani. So feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, just following up on what Adrian said, we're a pretty small city, 59, 60,000, I think, if we're lucky. And if we, I guess what I'm thinking is how many of our residents, our eligible voters, actually vote, number one. And of that percentage, if we split into 4 or 5 or 6 districts, how many eligible voters will be in those 4 to 5 districts? And of that, if we are only allowed to vote for one person, it seems to me that someone with perhaps maybe 100, 250 votes can represent an entire district. So I guess that's my concern. We're a small city, and we're not Los Angeles. We're not even Chino Hills or Brea with larger populations. And is that really going to be the most effective avenue for us? I understand we probably don't have a choice in this, and we're going to have to make it work. But that's my concern. Will we really, really have true representation if we break ourselves up into these smaller quadrants? Thank you.
Great, thank you. And as of now, we don't have any more hands raised, but I do want to leave it open for folks to comment on this process. Is it *6 to raise hand or *9? I see someone on the phone too. I think it's *6.
I think it's *6, yeah.
So *6 if you're on the phone to raise your hand. And feel free to use the raise hand function as well.
And oh, Greg raised his hand. And I just, before you call on Greg, I'm happy to go over Districtor once all of this is done.
Great. I'm going to allow Greg to talk. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Greg.
The last comment was very valid, especially too. The tax base here, I would have to say, is basically residential. Okay. Of course, we get our sales, we get our gas. We're adding, if people want to expand and have more choices of people to vote for, it's going to come at a price. Okay. And the other thing, and the last thing I'll ever bring this up again, I'm kind of the self-appointed historian of Diamond Bar for the last 10 years. You can see the labors of my work down at City Hall in cardboard boxes. Okay. And if people of Latin descent or Mexican descent are complaining they're not getting representation, it's like God said to the guy who kept praying to win the lotto, you gotta buy a ticket. I can go back to when we were run by a municipal, through the county, homeowners association, yada, yada, yada. And I remember one name, Frank Morales. He's probably the only person I remember he was American. I don't know what hyphenation he was. Okay. About the only people. So that's the only comment I have. One, if you need to have more people in each district to go out and want to become a council member, I don't know what the quality of work's going to be. And if you go to 5, 7, 8, 9, we have to pay these people. We have to reimburse them. We cover them in health, what have you. It's going to come at a price. That's it.
Thank you, Greg. And I am currently seeing no other raised hands. I Again, feel free to drop things in the chat. We will save it and take it into consideration. Another thing, though, that is helpful, and Liz will go into this with District R, is you all have the expertise in your city and know kind of the area pretty well, and can help us actually map things out. And I think actually Liz is going to share her screen right now and show you one of the tools that we have available that you can use to help us really in orienting the city and determining how we're going to draw these district boundaries. So go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. After I'm done with this, please feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, or continue with the public testimony portion. But to show you all how to use Districtor, I'm just gonna click on a random city. Once the city of Diamond Bar gets their own Districtor, it will be on the website. So you'll easily be able to find it there, and it'll take you directly to the city of Diamond Bar. You can see here, this is Anaheim. So I'm going to teach you how to draw a districted map, and then I'll teach you how to draw a community of interest map real quick. So you'll see the map here. You can zoom in and zoom out. I'm just zooming in with my mouse. You can also click these buttons over here. And then these are what you're going to use to draw the map, move the map, erase what you drew. So this hand, when you click down and hold and move around your mouse, you'll be able to move the map. It ensures that you don't mess up what you just drew. So let's go ahead and start drawing. When I click on the brush, it'll take you to different colors. Those colors are associated to each district. So let's go ahead and draw a blue district, and you'll see that it tells me the population as I am clicking. Remembering that we have to have districts relatively equal in size, it needs to be under a 10% deviation. What's really cool about this program is that it tells you the deviation size down here, so it does the math for you. Let me make this brush size larger, and then it'll draw a bunch of census blocks all at one time. Census blocks is the smallest geography unit that we use to draw districts. You'll see that I actually went over the ideal line. So I'm going to go to the eraser button, click on it, and I'm going to delete some of it. And just like the eraser, or just like the brush, I can change the size of how big I want the eraser to be. So now I'm at the ideal size, and you'll see that the deviation is well under 10%. And then when I want to switch over to another district and draw another one, right off the bat, I just recommend always clicking this so you don't accidentally draw over it. So this locks the districts of what you just drew. And then I'm going to click another color and then start drawing another district. So you'll see I've hit the ideal size. You can draw as many districts as you want, up to the number of elected officials, right? Or you can draw 1 or 2 or 3. So it's really entirely up to what you want to do and what you want your testimony to show. So once you're happy with how it looks, well, first, before you save it, you can also look at the different data layers. So you can look at it population by race, and it'll show you where folks in the city live. So total population, you can see the density, Black population. So that'll show you the total population. What we, in terms of the Voting Rights Act, we use the citizen voting age population to ensure that we are following we're in compliance with the Voting Rights Act. So this tells us the total population for the citizen voting age population. And then we could break it down further by Hispanic, Latino, white, Black. So all of these protected classes and white population will be able to see that when we are drawing. And then at the end, when we have drawn our districts, we can also see how our districts are composed. So it breaks it down by the different demographics as well. And this is the voting age population. So we can see and compare how those districts look. And then once we're happy with how things are, we can save it. And then the cool thing about once Diamond Bar gets their own districtor page, it'll say save to the gallery, and then it'll immediately go to the website where we'll be able to see it, and it's public testimony that way. So that is how you draw a districted map. Obviously, you can draw the entire city if you want, but just for time's sake, I'll stop at these three. And again, we want to keep this number down here under 10%. And then you can also look for the unassigned units, and it'll tell you exactly where they are. That's really handy when you're done drawing and you need to find all of those census blocks that you didn't quite find. Okay, so that is how you draw a districted map. Let me go back. Here is the website, draw communities. And again, I'm just going to go to Anaheim. And this one looks different. So no longer are we counting people, but we're really looking for the boundaries of your community. So that's what is most important to us, and you describing your community. So these are the same. This brush will allow you to draw your community of interest. So let's just say that's what that looks like. You get the same data layers as before, so you can break it down by race and citizen voting age populations as well. And it breaks it down. But in terms of public testimony, we really are looking for descriptions of your community. So what are the shared characteristics or bond? And how is it impacted by the city council? So this is, where you would describe your community and then name it here. So it could be like your school zone area or a park area. Other communities of interest could include religious places, so like synagogues or churches. Those are very common. And then you can also pinpoint your important place for your community. So a school, a park, very common. And then you can name it here. And then describe why it's important. And then you can draw multiple communities as well. All you have to do is hit this plus sign, and it'll give you another color. You can draw as many as you want. There is no limit other than your own sanity. And you'll draw that. Again, name your community and describe it here. And you'll be able to go back and describe them as well. And then you just hit save once you're happy with how it looks, and save to the gallery. And that's how you use Districtor. It's supposed to be simple, but if it's a little confusing, you are welcome to come back to these hearings. We'll be going over Districtor at each one of these public outreach meetings. And I'm happy to answer any questions on them. I think it'll make a little bit more sense once you see the Districtor for Diamond Bar. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Hopefully this is a tool that you'll be able to use throughout the entire process and help give testimony on your community.
Looks like Adrian has a question, so go ahead, Adrian.
In the Districtor website, are there examples of drawings that other cities have done or school districts?
Yes, let me go ahead and share my screen again. Let me pull up. So the city of, let's see. I'm going to share Modesto. They're a client that I worked with. They just passed their lines. This is the public gallery, and you can see this is what it will look like. So you'll be able to see what other people have drawn. We aren't allowed to delete any of them because it's considered public testimony. So we actually save them and look at every single one of them. So you can click on it and then see how people drew their own districts. What's really cool is that you can actually, if you like one, but you want some changes, you can actually draw on this and make your own. So let's say I just wanted this downtown area to be added. You can make changes and then save it as your own map. It's not going to overwrite this map, but you would be able to save it as your own.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Adrian. There were two questions in the chat. I answered them in the chat, but I'll just answer them for everybody. One was just when will this be up for Diamond Bar? We're hoping to have it up by next week. The folks at Districtor are in the process of just getting all the data right for it. And then Greg was asking, how do we deal with undeveloped or public land? Those are included in census blocks. So like we said earlier, the census blocks are basically the units that we use for creating these plans. And so Liz can kind of pull up and show an unpopulated area in Modesto.
So you can see this magnifying glass tells you exactly how many people are in each census block. And sometimes census blocks look really weird. So like this looks like a snake. And then you'll see very compact ones, rectangles, squares. These were created by the US Census Bureau, and they created them for the entire country. So don't blame us, blame them. But you can see total population and then the breakdown demographically. Each census block is going to have a different number of people in there. So here's 141, and then here's 44 right next to it. And then here's 0 population, population of 1. So these really do help help us draw and make sure that we are getting the correct census population in there, which is what we are legally obligated to do.
And then Grace had asked in the chat too, how many maps anyone can draw. There's no limit on it. You can draw as many as you'd like. You can save them. Usually what it will do is it will generate a little code at the end of each map too. And that's how you can reference that map if you're speaking for it in front of the city council or wanted to bring it to our attention here in a meeting. You can just say, hey, it's map, 2563 or something like that. And that's how you can indicate which map.
Yeah, so they'll have IDs, just like Joe said. You can name it, absolutely. Or if you don't name it, you'll still get an ID number. So we'll be able to track that map.
So with that, I do want to leave this open for any additional questions on either districtor or just public comments about the redistricting process or anything that we talked about tonight. So feel free to raise your hand. And at this point, there are no hands raised, no questions in the chat. Ryan is including some information about the city and his contact information as well in the chat. So feel free to email him if you have any questions about this process or any comments.
Yes,
Again.
and if we can, I'd also like to add in the chat, you'll see some information. We do have some e-subscription options for anyone who's available, and we have a weekly e-newsletter that goes out. So if you haven't had the opportunity to sign up for those, I would encourage you to do so. There will be information on this process included in those. And of course, our social media accounts will be updating the community with any information about the districting process. We also have a direct email line that you can use that's on the districting page. And of course, my contact information is available in the chat if you'd like to contact me directly, but would encourage as much participation as possible in this process. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who participated tonight. This is the very first meeting, so very thankful that a lot of people attended, and we certainly hope to see you at future events. And with that, I think we'll call it a night.
Yes, thank you again for everyone attending, and hope to see you at future meetings. Have a good night.